Psalm 64, I've entitled, Their Cause of Failure is Their Own Tongue. And with that, that's a phrase from the psalm. There is the both prayer and faith that those who act in secret, that those who act as if no one is watching them and do so with words like arrows, those words or those arrows will ultimately come back against them because of the faith that God is a God of justice. And that's again what makes this different than just a poetic screed. This is a prayer. And with that, let me begin with reading the psalm, and then I'll go back, as is our way, and show you some of the artistry and the message. Psalm 64. For the conductor, a psalm of David. Hear, God, my voice and my plea. From terror of a foe, preserve my life. Conceal me from the secrets of evildoers, from the tumult of the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongue like a sword and aim their arrow, a bitter word, to shoot in concealment the innocent. Suddenly they shoot and they have no fear. They bolster each other with evil words. They tell of concealing snares, saying to themselves, who can see it? They search out injustice. They complete a searched out search within a person, a heart's depth. May God shoot them an arrow, suddenly wounding them, and their cause of failure will be their own tongue. They will shake their head, all that see them, and they will be in awe, each person, and they will declare it the work of God, and God's doing. They will reason. Happy shall be the righteous in Adonai, and will take refuge in God, and they shall praise all the upright in heart. And so this psalm has no characterization of a time or a place. And indeed, it can be potentially written in any time and place. But the classic commentators, Midrash Tehillim, the early compilation of homilies by the rabbis of Israel, and Rashi, the important commentator of France of the 11th century, will identify this as a prophetic psalm that David wrote on behalf of Daniel. Daniel, who will wind up in the lion's den in chapter 6 of the book of Daniel. And they'll say that Daniel is clearly of the tribe of Judah. They will add is a descendant of David. And what, if you read particularly chapter 6 of the book of Daniel, you have the following story. Daniel is an admired advisor to the king, but the other advisors are jealous of him. And so they get the king to pass a law that, in the way they present it, is in the abstract. It's a royal ban that says any person who addresses a petition to any god or human besides the king, Darius, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into a lion's den. And then Daniel goes to pray because he's loyal to God, and they catch him in prayer. And these advisors then go to King Darius and they say, well, Daniel, he violated your edict. He needs to be thrown into the lion's den. And then as the story unfolds, the king feels very fond of Daniel, and he'll actually sit outside the lion's den. And the lions, as the king will suggest, will not attack God's servant, Daniel, and they don't. And then Daniel is released from the lion's den, and those who spoke ill of him, who set him up for this punishment, at the end It's actually verse 25 of chapter 6 of Daniel. Those men who had slandered Daniel were brought, and together with their children and wives were thrown into the lion's den. They had hardly reached the bottom of the den when the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Again, there is this graphic dimension of punishments in the Bible that can sometimes be disturbing to us. Well, with that, as just a context for the psalm, let me go back through it and point out its artistry. It's actually composed of two pairs of sentences. So verses 2 and 3 are the psalmist's plea. Verses 4 and 5 describe the acts of the wicked. Verses 6 and 7, the thoughts that prompt those shooting of words. That sense in 6, who can see us. Verses 8 and 9 are God's punishment for those liars, those wicked users of tongue. And then verses 10 and 11 are the reaction of the righteous. So on one hand, this is a poem of pairs moving in a steady path. There's a lot of wordplay. A reoccurring sound is the sound of yirah, repeated over and over, which with they sound the same, but there's two different words being repeated. When it's with an aleph, it means to shoot an arrow. When it's with a hey, it means to fear God, to have awe of God. And you'll see this sound, yirah. I mean, just because it's in front of me, verse 5, pitom, suddenly, yora'u, they shoot, velo yira'u, and they do not fear. So you can hear shooting and fearing sound essentially the same. That's part of the artistry. Here's something that I picked up only in my last reading, and that is the shooting is of the tam. Verse 5, they shoot the innocent, tam, and 9, koro'evam. So tam are the innocent, vam are in this case the wicked, who see them. So there's again that kind of, you got to listen carefully, tam, vam, who it is that's being addressed. There's another quality. And so now I begin with content rather than just with some of that assonance, some of the sounds that create a rhythm, and a quality of concealment. So I begin with verse 3 because of the word conceal. You'll see it again in verse 5. Tastireni, verse 3, b'mistarim in verse 5. There's an element that these evildoers are seeking to hide what they're doing. So let me again go through it. Verse 2 and 3, the first pair. Hear, God, my voice and my plea. For terror of a foe, preserve my life. Conceal me from the secrets of evildoers, from the tumult of the workers of iniquity. So there is, we talked last week about this word sur, or as rock, here used as an image of preserving. The sur, titzor, preserve my life from those who terrorize me, mipachad. The word sichi I translate as plea. In Brachot 26b in the Talmud, it's used to mean fervent prayer in this context. Some translate it as my voice in my cry. And you're looking to God to conceal from the secrets of evildoers. So that's their modus operandi. They operate on some level in secrecy, and yet, mirikshat, they create a tumult. Robert Alter translates it as a hubbub. Literally, regish is feeling, so it's from the aroused workers of iniquity. But the image is they're creating a quality of noise. Some commentators see the noise as a taunt, quality of a taunting nature, others as distraction. See, they're concealing by lots of distraction their work of sinfulness, aven, iniquity. And now the next pair. And the next pair again is the nature of their wickedness. This describes them, 4 and 5, describes the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongue like a sword. So their tongue is a weapon that they aim their arrow. Devar mar, a bitter word, or back to hell, in terms of his comment, in that mar is often not just bitter, some translate it as a poisonous word. You think about those, people whose arrows on the tips have poison. And back to concealment, they shoot in concealment tam. Tam is again a word of multi-valence. It's the innocent, it's the simple, it's the ones with integrity. Suddenly, pitom, circle the word pitom because it'll come back in the psalm. Suddenly they shoot, the lo yira'u, and they have no fear. So they're fearless. And the next pair, verses 6 and 7, is their mindset that creates this fearlessness. Yichasku means they strengthen or they bolster each other. Devar ra, with evil words. They tell of concealing snares. And timon can be concealing. Or it can be finished. It's an assonance. So one second, one second. They bolster each other who can see. Timon yisapru timon. They tell of concealing snares or finished snares. Will come up in verse 7, the same word. But here, see in verse 6, it's with a tet, concealing. And verse 7, the same sound, tamnu, is complete. And so again, it has this multivalence that what is concealed, they also see as complete. And then a fairly obscure verse 7, they search out injustice, and it can be dash. They complete a searched out search within a person, a heart's depth. And that can be a description of them, that what they are doing is in secret. They are, if you will, concealing what they seek to do in their deepest selves. Listen to a translation from the King James Version of verse 7 and then 8. They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search, both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. And so that's verse 7. Again, kind of obscure. And one last comment in terms of, before we move on to the next pair, ultimately, what allows them to bolster themselves, verse 6, is this statement regarding their concealed acts. Who can see it? And there's ambiguity. The it can mean who can see them, the evildoers. It can be who can see the evil acts, or who can see the victims. We see this notion. Here's one other where it's expressed that we saw earlier. And this is recently Psalm 59, verse 8. Behold, this is a description of evildoers. They bark with their mouth, swords in their lips, for they say in their hearts, who hears it? So this is an image of a quality of impunity because they can get away with it. There is no all-seeing eye. They are protected by concealment. And now that word pitom suddenly comes back. But verses 8 and 9 is God's retribution. But it's a prayer. Make it, at least it can be viewed that way, or it can be viewed in the present perfect, either a description of what is going on or a description of a hoped for future. May God shoot them an arrow, suddenly wounding them, suddenly hitting them. And verse 9, and their cause of failure will be their own tongue. They will shake their head, all that see them. And so there's a concept the rabbis refer to as midah keneged midah, measure for measure. In English, the expression, what goes around comes around, that they who suddenly shot with an arrow, but their arrow was an arrow of words, may God shoot them an arrow. This is an arrow to injure them. Suddenly, back to the same word, wounding them, and their cause of failure will be their own tongue. We've seen that image also in Psalms. You know, the pit or the trap that they have placed for me, may they fall into their own trap. And now verses 10 and 11, the reaction of the righteous. And they will be in awe, each person, and they will declare it, the work of God and God's doings. They will reason. Happy shall be the righteous, and Adonai will take refuge in God, and they shall praise all the upright in heart. And so there's also this poetic dimension that the last two words, kol yishrei lev, all the upright in heart, are, you know, we had the image earlier of the lave of the evildoers, which can be heart or mind, and their heart and mind, see in verse 7, is the, you know, they're looking deep in their heart for evil, to conceal their plots, but it's ultimately yishrei lev, the heart of the upright, that will have the last word. And circle word, because the last word will be praise of God, not the word of poisonous arrow, of the liar, the one who speaks false words from a place of concealment. And in that sense, there's this poetic journey of those who act in concealment. May you, God, conceal me from them. They who act by going into the depths of their heart will ultimately, to act suddenly out of concealment, will suddenly be attacked by their own words because of God's justice. And the last word will be the words of the upright of heart. And so I'm in this kind of slow reading, made aware of the artistry of the word plays, of the assonance, of the repetition of words that create the sense of what they sought to do is a reversal of fortunes. And that ultimately, those who sharpen their tongue like a sword and aim their arrow with a bitter word, with a poisonous word from a place of concealment against the innocent, they ultimately will be seen as having been injured themselves. And the word here in verse 10, and they will be in awe, each person. So the observers who would have been the victims or just people in the world will declare this justice as the work of God, and they'll do so haskilu, with using their reason that in the world justice will prevail. So with that, I invite some of your reactions. It's great to see the number 18 as the number of participants, a good number of affirmation in dealing with the dangers of lies, the dangers not just of lies, but those who use words, as in the Daniel story, to trick and hurt those who are otherwise noble. So any thoughts or reactions to Psalm 64? Yes. One second. Okay, Geraldine first, and I think after I saw Arnold's hand. So Geraldine and then Arnold.
Okay, mine will be quick. I think it's a yes/no answer.
Okay.
I noticed that in verses 9 and 10, they both start with the and they're translated that way. But is it possible that we're talking about the same group of people that, or is he wishing death on the evildoers and other people will be righteous? Or is it possible that the bad people got their lesson and learned to stop lying? And does that make sense?
Yeah. So I hear what you're asking. Let me reframe it. So 9 and 10 go to, they're not a pair in that breakdown, but could it be that everyone is shaking their head, acknowledging God's retribution, and they will be in awe? So is the they being referred to potentially the evildoers? Will they have had a change of heart? And it's possible. That's the ambiguity in the poetry of the they. By using a pronoun rather than a noun, there is, as you point out, Geraldine, a potential ambiguity. And I shared before that story of Rabbi Meir's wife, Bruria, who heard her husband praying for the obliteration of his enemies. And she said, no, you don't want to destroy your enemies. You want to destroy their wicked acts. So, that's ambiguity.
I was hoping for something,
Yeah, so that ambiguity is potentially there. That's a good observation. Arnold?
I had a couple questions, Rabbi. When the psalm is referring,
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize
we got two Arnies. On my screen, you're next to each other. So Arnold and then Arnie. Go ahead, okay. Arnold.
All right. A couple of quick comments. My immediate impression was that human nature hasn't changed in 2,500, 3,000 years. You see the same behavior today of evil speech and evil inclination, as was as from the Psalms. The second thought is that in this psalm, it's the evil ones are the people of action. I don't see action on the part of the righteous, other than to hope that God will cause the evil doers harm.
That's a good observation, Arnold. That also was commented on by the Spanish commentator Ibn Ezra. And he commented, also aware of a quality of prayer rather than action, in which he said, in sometimes you're so overwhelmed by the evil that you're only left with prayer. But that also is a tension for me, Arnold, in terms of here it's a plea to God rather than, ferreting out and shining a light on the liar. And one last comment that came with your comment, and that is the motivation for lying is who can see it in verse 6, or verse 5, they have no fear. There's that Woody Allen movie, Crimes and Misdemeanors, which interestingly is about an ophthalmologist who helps people see, and the question is, can he get away with a crime because he believes there is no all-seeing eye? Meaning, if no one sees it, can you get away with it? And so here, who can see it is their sense of, I have no fear, no one's watching, with the ambiguity again of no one's watching them, no one's watching out for the victim, or no one's really paying attention to how this is a lie. So all that's within the it. Arnie Raymond.
So I had a couple questions. One is when the psalm refers to they, or is they evildoers? Is that who it's referring to?
So that relates back to Geraldine's comment, because it seems to be the case for verses 6 and 7 where they is used. It's also in the plural, it's in verse 9, but verse 10 shifts apparently, though ambiguously, to the other they the observers of the wicked. So part of what we've seen with Psalms is this ambiguity around pronouns, which is the nature of poetry. And it's even more accented in Hebrew, in that there is no capitalization of pronouns in Hebrew. So not in the case of a they, but in the case of a he, you never know if it's referring to God or a person. Marion?
Going back to they, verse 7 confused me because the evildoers are seeking out injustice doesn't make real sense.
Right. So that's
Thank
where
you, Arnie.
So they search out injustice, meaning they seek out ways to do injustice. And then the next phrase is, the translators like Robert Alter will acknowledge that it's kind of garbled, or if you will, poetically ambiguous.
Okay.
It seems to be, in my reading, is they complete in Hebrew, there's chefes mechupas. So that gets translated as a searched out search, meaning they're digging deep within a person, but the person is themselves a heart's depth or a mind's depth, which is just a way of saying that they are concealing deep within themselves their evil intentions. But that particular verse, it's why I even read the King James translation of it. I'll read it again. They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search. Both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. So you can see that's not so clear either. But the implication is that the word lave, by the way, which will reappear in terms of the upright of heart, in the Bible, lave is both heart, but heart was the seat of the mind. So they're seeking in the recesses of their mind these to find iniquities, to find the plan. They're scheming within the depths of themselves, each of them. So an awkward phrase that points toward a quality of hiddenness within. That too is kind of perhaps a poetic device. Alex and Mimi, and then we'll pull it together.
I just would like to point out some more of the poetic devices. Verse 9, and the cause of failure will be their own tongue, who shake their head, all that see them. So the question, it answers the question, who will see this, see it?
Yeah.
It's answered in verse 9. Everyone will see it.
And I just point out again in reference to you pointing to the them there, who will see it,
Yeah.
is again the play on vam, them, and tam, the innocent. So the innocent will see them, tam, vam, which is from verse 5.
And another possible parallel is verse 10, Ru Kol Adam, which translate as there'll be an awe each person, but it also could mean, everyone will be afraid, which is
right.
Which would be parallel from verse 2.
Right.
Preserve me from pachad, from the terror.
Yeah. So v'yiru kol adam, it's not again clear. So it's a switch. Here, the fear I translate as awe is the fear of God, at least in its context.
Right.
Because each will declare that this is the work of God. And repeatedly, the image of the Bible is the fear of God, which means the awe of God, God as awesome and awful. But also there is that assonance of kol ro'e vam v'yiru kol adam. So they will see them, and that each will be in fear. And here too, the poet had a choice, because the word Adam, like Adam, often is Ish, B'nai Ish, but clearly he was going for that poetic sound of Vam, Adam, Tam, all somehow at odds with each other. And the last comment, Mimi, and then we'll pull it together.
And it's a good comment. I think it's appropriate to be the last comment. And that is, when I was reading this before class started, and I was looking for words can't be taken back. They're always there.
And that's the image of the arrow. Back to that image which we started the class with. And that is, once an arrow is released, there's no taking it back, which is part of its danger. And again, with the opening of the image of the poisonous arrow, the arrow is the image often used for words, because once released, you have no control, as you highlight, Mimi. It can shoot from a distance and has its own trajectory that can be sometimes unanticipated. And so words, and of course, it's ultimately a tool of violence, and that words can become like arrows of violence, leading to violence. Elie Wiesel would teach that the precondition for violence is words, because words shape thoughts, and thoughts shape attitudes, attitudes shape emotion, and that's what leads to violence. And so it all begins with misuse of words. With that, note two things. One, tomorrow is a different kind of psalm. I entitle it from a verse, Your Paths Drip with Rich Abundance. It's about God's goodness in enabling crops in the world to flourish. It's a Thanksgiving psalm. It has a universal quality. It's God as creator in much of its focus. Very different. One other thought, and that is it delights me to have 18 people sharing today's class. Something for you to consider, and that is if you do Facebook or other social media, if you are enjoying the Psalm classes, you might put on your Facebook that you enjoyed Psalm 64 and looking forward to 65 tomorrow, and that people can go to the CBI website, cbi18.org, to gain access to the link for all of our classes. With that, I thank each of you, and we conclude with Kaddish. So those honoring a loved one are invited to join together as we recite the Kaddish. Let me just move it over. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah
Amen.
v'yalma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agalau v'zman kari v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'me'al maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Amen.
To each of you, thank you for making this a gathering, and I look forward to Psalm 65 tomorrow.